I'm Jonathan Watt with Atara Group International. We hope you're enjoying our content, and if you are and would like to support our ministry, please press the like button and subscribe to our channel. We've been talking about different aspects in the history of the Christian church. I want to explore a little bit with you today the Galileo Affair of the early 1600s, in which science and faith and the limits of authority all seem to come into collision. In the early 17th century, a revolutionary scientific theory collided with centuries of religious doctrine, sparking one of the most famous conflicts between the church and science, and we call it the Galileo Affair. Galileo Galilei, who lived from 1564 to 1642, he was an Italian astronomer, physicist, and mathematician, and he became the central figure in this dramatic episode in history, challenging prevailing ideas about the cosmos and prompting the Catholic Church to confront its interpretation of Scripture in light of new empirical evidence. The Galileo Affair was not merely a clash between science and religion, though. It was a complex conflict involving politics, personalities, and then the evolving nature of knowledge and scientific exploration. Galileo is connected with what we call the Copernican revolution. He grew up during the Renaissance, a period of profound intellectual and cultural change in Europe. He was deeply influenced by mathematics, physics, and the new telescopic observations that were starting to transform people's understanding of the universe. And around the turn of the 17th century, a man named Nicolaus Copernicus had proposed a heliocentric model of our universe, arguing that the sun, not the earth, was at the center of the solar system. And this challenged the geocentric model, which had been widely accepted since antiquity and was being strongly supported by church authorities based on their scriptural interpretation. So Galileo's telescopic observations, including the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus, provide some compelling evidence that supported the Copernican model. And he was arguing that the empirical observations and reason could reveal truths about the natural world that were not explicitly described in Scripture. Now, this approach represented a significant shift in methodology because it was starting to emphasize observation over tradition, at least in some areas, and it was starting to challenge the authority of long-standing interpretations and, of course, church authorities who held to those interpretations. Now, there was a warning shot fired in the year 1616. The church formally addressed the controversy, and the Congregation of the Index, under the guidance of the Inquisition, examined the heliocentric theory. And Galileo was summoned and warned that the Copernican model could not be taught as fact because it appeared contrary to Scripture. The church declared heliocentrism, quote, formally heretical, though Galileo himself was not yet punished, at least not at this point. The 1616 decree did not prohibit discussion or mathematical demonstration of heliocentrism, and it restricted its presentation as physical truth. Galileo was instructed to treat the theory as a hypothesis rather than as fact. Now, this distinction is critical. See, the church was not opposing science per se, but rather perceived a conflict between empirical claims and a literal biblical interpretation, at least on certain verses in the Bible. So ultimately, dialogue confronted doctrine. And Galileo's 1632 publication, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, presented arguments for both the geocentric and the heliocentric systems of this part of the world, and framed it as a conversation between three characters. So while seemingly neutral, the book clearly favored heliocentrism, and its accessible language made scientific arguments understandable to a broader audience, and it also irritated powerful church officials who interpreted it as mocking the church's position. So the publication coincided with a politically sensitive period. Pope Urban VIII, who had initially been supportive of Galileo, felt personally slighted by this recent work. And the Pope's reaction, combined with concerns about authority and orthodoxy, led to Galileo being summoned to Rome to face the Roman Inquisition in 1633. Now, there was a trial and what we call abjuration. Galileo's trial was dramatic and it was highly charged. He faced charges of heresy for advocating heliocentrism, contrary to the 1616 decree. The Inquisition was less concerned, however, with science itself than with the perceived challenge to the ecclesiastical authority. So, under threat of torture, Galileo recanted his support for heliocentrism in a formal abjuration, a statement of rejection of a belief. He was sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of his life. His books were banned or censored. And according to contemporary accounts, Galileo's famous alleged utterance, "Eppur si muove, and yet it moves," expressed his continued conviction in the heliocentric model, though historians debate whether or not he actually said that famous phrase. Regardless, the phrase has become symbolic of the tension between intellectual inquiry and institutional authority. Science, faith, and authority all colliding together here. The Galileo Affair is often portrayed as a simple balance of science versus religion, but as you can see, the reality was more nuanced. Several factors contributed to the conflict. One of them was the interpretation of Scripture. Church authorities felt obliged to defend literal interpretations of passages on certain biblical themes, and Galileo's heliocentric theory challenged their reading and created a tension between faith and empirical observation. Secondly, there was the issue of politics and personalities. Galileo's relationship with Pope Urban VIII deteriorated, no surprise here, due to the perceived personal slights, demonstrating how personal and political dynamics influence doctrinal enforcement. Third, there are methodological shifts going on. Galileo's reliance on observation and mathematics represented a new approach to understanding nature. And this epistemological shift challenged many centuries of reliance on philosophical authority and tradition. So the affair, no surprise, had lasting consequences. It underscored the need for clearer boundaries between scientific inquiry and theological authority, and it highlighted the potential for intellectual inquiry to be suppressed by institutional power. Yet Galileo's work laid the foundation for modern physics and astronomy and demonstrated the enduring power of empirical evidence. So, what's the legacy here? Well, Galileo's trial became a symbol for the complex relationship between science and religion. Now, in 1992, Pope John Paul II formally acknowledged the Church's historic error in condemning Galileo, highlighting that the conflict was indeed as much about interpretation and authority as it was about matters of science. So today, the Galileo Affair serves as a cautionary tale as well as a source of inspiration. It reminds scholars, clergy, and the public public that the pursuit of knowledge requires both courage and integrity, and that institutions must grapple carefully with new evidence even when it challenges long-held beliefs. So let's continue the conversation. The Galileo Affair invites reflection on the balance between faith, authority, the pursuit of knowledge. How do religious institutions engage with scientific discoveries today? And what lessons can we learn about, humility, dialogue, and institutional flexibility in the face of new ideas? We encourage you to share your thoughts and suggest future topics in the comments. Your reflections help guide our exploration of fascinating historical episodes that shape the development of Christianity and its interaction with society. Atara Group International is all about supporting leaders and organizations. So for churches, nonprofits, and organizations seeking guidance in leadership and program development and event planning, we provide tailored support. Their services include leadership, staff training, grant writing, keynote speaking, and retreat or conference leadership. And we help organizations align vision with strategy and increase impact on the communities that we serve.